MyMy xin kính chào quý vị khán giả của đài truyền hình VNTV và xin chào đón quý vị đến với chương trình Cuộc sống và sự nghiệp. Kính thưa quý vị, hiện MyMy đang có mặt tại nhà sách Warwick trong buổi gặp gỡ với nhà văn Thi Diem Thuy ra mắt tác phẩm đầu tay của cô, đó là tiểu thuyết The Gangster We're All Looking For, hay còn tạm dịch là Kẻ du đảng mà chúng ta đang lùng kiếm. Đây là một tác phẩm mà chương trình One Book One Senegal đã chọn được Book of the Year trong năm 2011. Đây cũng là một vinh dự cho cộng đồng người Việt Senegal nói riêng và cộng đồng người Việt trên tất cả Hoa Kỳ nói chung. Và sau đây xin mời quý vị cùng VNTV gặp gỡ nhà văn Thi Diem Thuy. Tối ngày 6 tháng 2, nhà văn người Mỹ gốc Việt Thi Diem Thuy đã có buổi đọc, trình diễn thơ và một số phần trong cuốn tiểu thuyết nổi tiếng viết bằng tiếng Anh của cô The Gangster We're All Looking For, gã du đảng mà tất cả chúng ta đang lùng kiếm. Câu chuyện viết về đời sống của cô tại Linda Vista khi còn nhỏ. Sau buổi trình diễn, Thi Diem Thuy đã giải đáp nhiều thắc mắc về vấn đề di dân Việt Nam, được chuyển tải qua tiểu thuyết và kinh nghiệm cá nhân của mình, ranh giới giữa hư cấu và tính tự truyện trong tác phẩm, quan niệm về nghệ thuật, tiểu thuyết kết hợp trình diễn và bày tỏ ước mong cuốn tiểu thuyết sẽ được dịch sang tiếng Việt để không chỉ bạn đọc Việt Nam mà chính những người thân trong gia đình cô có dịp tiếp cận. Ra đi từ năm 6 tuổi, thành đạt trên nước Mỹ nhưng luôn đau đớn khắc khoải với quê hương trong đời sống và tác phẩm. Thi Diem Thuy là nhà thơ, tiểu thuyết gia và diễn viên kịch. Cô sinh năm 1972 tại Phan Thiết, Bình Thuận. Theo cha vượt biên năm 1978 bằng thuyền đánh cá, được tàu Mỹ vớt và định cư tại San Diego, California. Mẹ và chị của cô vượt biên 2 năm sau, sang trại ở Malaysia. Anh cả và một người chị của cô bị chết đuối hồi cô còn nhỏ. Anh cả thì chết đuối ở biển Việt Nam hồi anh lên 6 tuổi, còn chị thì chết đuối ở trại tị nạn bên Malaysia. Cô có 2 em sinh tại Mỹ. Năm 1990, cô theo Đại học Hampshire College ở tiểu bang Massachusetts, môn các nghiên cứu văn hóa và văn chương hậu thực dân. Năm 1993, cô sang Pháp khảo cứu về những tấm ảnh mà người Pháp chụp người Việt trong thời thuộc địa từ thập niên 1900. Người ta nghĩ rằng cuốn The Gangster We're All Looking For đầu tay của cô được viết như tự sự về chính cuộc đời và gia đình cô, nhưng nhà văn Thúy cho không phải như vậy. Cô bắt đầu từ đời mình, nhưng sau đó đã để cho các nhân vật dẫn dắt câu chuyện, từ hoàn thiện tính cách ở mỗi người. Trong buổi đọc, cô giải thích ý nghĩa vì sao cô chọn từ nước rất nhiều trong câu chuyện của cô.
For those of you who haven't read the book, the novel is about 3 characters: a Vietnamese man, his wife, and their daughter, and they are refugees of the war in Vietnam, and they're now living in the United States in San Diego. And they're haunted by the memory of their life in Vietnam, and in particular by the loss of the girl's brother who has drowned. So the element of water which kind of defines the book is most present in Pham. The notion of water and its absence, of the water and the desert, of what happens when water vanishes. So for these refugees who live in this apartment building at 49th and Orange, they have a swimming pool in their courtyard, and when they look into the pool, it's like they're looking into the ocean, and they can somehow imagine all the way across the Pacific to Vietnam. So when the landlord empties the pool and paves it over, it's more than the loss of a swimming pool for them. It's the loss of a very vital connection to their homeland.
Nhà văn Thúy đã sống trong một nỗi buồn không được khỏa lấp bởi một gia đình không trọn vẹn của cô, vì những tình cảm không được tìm thấy. Khi được hỏi, có bao giờ ba cô kể cho cô nghe về chuyện qua đời của anh cô không?
I had lost a couple siblings older than me, and there's a term, I guess it's just like the English word lost. You say you lost someone. But in Vietnamese it sounds more like you lost them and you might find them. You know, it doesn't feel so definite. So we always just said, you know, we lost them. But I think as a child, certainly, because I had lost my siblings in Vietnam, or my brother in Vietnam, my sister later was killed in Malaysia. She died in Malaysia. Because my brother was buried in Vietnam, and Vietnam was not a place we could go back to, there was a great amount of unsettled grief because it wasn't. I think when the body of the one you desire and long for and miss is elsewhere, and you cannot go to that place, then there's a tension. So we could not speak about certain things. The war we did not talk about, and certainly not about my brother. We never talked about him. So that's one of the things that I think writing the book was an exploration of for me, was to kind of release, to grieve for many different things through these characters.
Một khán giả mến mộ tác phẩm của cô đặt lên câu hỏi tại sao cô lại chọn tựa đề The Gangster We're All Looking For cho cuốn sách này.
I chose the title, The Gangster We're All Looking For. It was always going to be that title, though there was, an issue with my publisher because there aren't really, it's not gangster rap, and there's, like, when you use the word gangster, it has very specific connotations and within American audience, all of that, and someone could read this whole book and think, where's the gangster? I want my money back. I'm sorry, Warwicks, if that happens. I'm not liable. But it's significant that the title is spoken by the young girl, an adolescent girl, who says, when I grow up, I'm going to be the gangster we are all looking for. So it's certainly a projection of a kind of bravado and an attitude of rebellion and also just the notion of a figure that might possibly be able to hold things together that are really falling apart. So it's almost a romantic notion in many ways, but it's also the idea of if there's someone who you're waiting so long and so hard for, what would it take for you to become that person yourself?
Chiến tranh đã làm biết bao số phận thay đổi bất ngờ và đau đớn. Cô suy nghĩ gì về chiến tranh?
I think that war has a very long aftermath. There's a build up to war, and then there's the battles themselves, and then you say that a war has ended on a certain date, but there's such a long aftermath. It takes generations to absorb and understand what happened, and I mean, even with the World War II generation, the soldiers who came back to the States didn't talk about what they saw for a long time, though they were heroes, but they didn't talk about war is something that people go through and then swallow. And unless you went through it too, there's no way to explain, right? So there's that. And in that sense, I feel like actually Vietnam veterans, U.S. veterans of the Vietnam War, and Vietnamese refugees have more in common than, those who have never been to Vietnam. I mean, there is a connection. I feel like it is a phenomenon of all war that you have refugees. War creates displacement. It impacts the environment in ways that take a very long time to recover from, if ever. And it impacts people in a physical and psychic way that takes a very long time to recover from, if ever. So I think that if we can calculate the cost of that as a society, then it may affect how we plan for war, whether we go into wars the way that we do, But certainly every war that we are engaged with will result in refugees, and some of them will come to America, and they will become Americans.
Một vị khán giả khác hỏi tại sao cô chọn viết về câu chuyện này. Cô trả lời với một giọng thật trầm ấm.
I work in prose, poetry, and solo performance. So this story, Gangster, has been developed in a number of different ways during the whole process of working on this book. I have a solo performance called Red Fiery Summer that is an adaptation of the title chapter. So that was one way of exploring how to tell this story. This is a story that I feel I had to write first, partly because it's a debt to my parents. It's, 20-some years after the fact, I'm saying they have come to America. Here they are. And it's a story that has to come before every other story, I think, for myself, because these are the people who carried me to this country. And when they carried me to this country, they carried me to English. And when they carried me to English, I carried them through English to you. So that's my first responsibility, I feel. It was never a question of, what is it, I'm not the kind of writer who says like, what do I want to write about? I write about the things that I already feel very strongly I have to write about. And then I just figure out, how can I write about this? How can I create a portrait of a man who is largely invisible to the people whose lawns he cleans, and yet whose humanity I want the reader to recognize? Like, how do I show that? How do I go about doing that? So this book, it's not a matter of choices.
Và một vị khán giả này thắc mắc muốn biết thêm ba mẹ của cô bây giờ ở đâu.
My father always wanted to go back, though there are many people of his generation, Vietnamese people, who say they will never go back because of the communists. And even those people have a love of land, separate, of course, from the government, but they feel that what the communists have done in being in power in Vietnam that to go back would be to support them. My father doesn't feel that way at all. My mother, when my mom knew that she was going to die, she wanted to be taken back to Vietnam. It was always her hope to spend the last of her life in Vietnam. She wanted to be buried there. And so my parents, even though they fled, I think they were always turned toward Vietnam in some way. They always hoped for a day that they might be able to go back to Vietnam. Now, they, I think, struggled very hard to be in America and to become Americans. And at some point, I feel like they gave up that struggle. They gave up that hope and transferred it all into their children, that they might become Americans, the children. And yet, my father, now that he's in Vietnam, I talk to him and he loves to speak with me in English, right? And this is like his Paris moment, right? Where now he's in Vietnam, he misses speaking English. And I'm the only person he speaks English with. So, I call him and I speak with him in Vietnamese, and he speaks with me in English. And it's the funniest thing. And then he says things like, I really miss that carne asada taco, outside the liquor store in Linda Vista, and so it's, or like we went and we brought him a Chargers jersey, and ooh, that was great, and then so that's when I found out that, Larry English had read from my book, right? A San Diego Chargers person had read from my book. I was like, oh, my dad would just, what would he give to hear this, Talk about arriving, right? So my father's back, but politically it's complicated, He didn't have citizenship. He didn't have Vietnamese citizenship when he returned. He had to go and apply. It was like a story from Chekhov. Like, I want to write this story, and it would be called, like, Mr. Lay is invited to apply for Vietnamese citizenship every 3 months, So he would go and apply, and they would take his money, take his fees, and deny him citizenship for whatever reasons, and invite him to come back in 3 months, And when he first told me this, I was incensed. I said, Dad, if you're not a Vietnamese citizen, who is? I don't understand this. And he said, I'm here. Like, they can't throw me in jail. They can't do anything to me. I'm here. I have land. It's not in my name, but it's mine. I'll get citizenship. I'll transfer it over, and, I'll just write it out. And it took him 3 years, but he got his citizenship. And so it's not politically the best system, but he doesn't mistake the government for the country. Most Vietnamese people living in Vietnam don't. What they want is to continue to live as they have for many, many generations, and to continue to keep their family homes, and to be open and exposed to the rest of the world too, especially because most of the population was born after the war, so they're very curious about what's going on outside of Vietnam. And at some point, the government's not going to be able to stop them from finding out. And the tide will turn. I don't doubt that.
Sau buổi đọc trong phần cuốn tiểu thuyết của cô, Mimi có dịp tiếp xúc với nhà văn Lê Thị Diễm Thúy. Câu hỏi đầu tiên Mimi muốn biết là trong câu chuyện chỉ có viết về những kẻ du đãng là những người mơ mộng và luôn có một giấc mơ. Vậy thì giấc mơ đó là gì? Cô không ngần ngại và trả lời.
Well, I think the dream is it's to do with being free, right? I mean, at the base, it's really about freedom, like personal freedom, a freedom to, not be under any kind of imposition. Like the character of the father, he was a gangster when he was in Vietnam, so he was kind of a rebel, kind of outside of the norm of society. And he's still that kind of person, but when he comes to the U.S., it's a very different, it's something very different because he's very marginalized. You see what I mean? Like he has a different kind of isolation because he doesn't speak English. He's in a very different country. It's not his country. So it's like he has to let go of that attitude, that persona, right? And it gets passed on to maybe the daughter, right? Who is then able to assume a voice to tell the story of the gangster, right? And so it's complicated in terms of who that person is, who the gangster is, but it goes through different transformations.
Khi được hỏi quyết định nào đã thúc đẩy chị chọn ba mẹ mình là nhân vật chính và đem hình ảnh đời sống thực tế của họ vào câu chuyện?
Well, that's very traditional in a Vietnamese family, that the father is kind of the one to hold the family together, and even when he can't, the family still looks to him to hold the family together. Though really, Vietnamese women are very, very strong, and they actually do a lot of the work in the family. They don't get so much credit for it, but they really do. Everybody knows that, right? So I wanted to show this relationship between these two people, this man and this woman, this married couple, but to show all the different tensions, you know what I mean? Like they're clearly in love with each other. They clearly have this very strong relationship, but it's under a lot of different kinds of stresses, And I feel like it's a portrait of a marriage, right? And it's true what you're saying, that in the Vietnamese American community, a lot of times we don't like to talk about things that we feel it's not safe to talk about, or we don't want to show that. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's behind closed doors, or we have a certain kind of model minority trap that many Asian Americans fall into, right? Where it's only safe to talk about the good things that you do, Yeah. But good or bad, I think the job of a writer, of any artist, is to show what's real, and there's no shame in what's real if the reason why you're showing what's real is informed by love.
Trong bài thơ, nhà văn Lê Thị Diễm Thúy viết tặng người em của cô nhấn mạnh với 3 câu: Let people know that Vietnam is not a war, but a piece of a sister and we are so much more. Việt Nam không phải là chiến tranh, nhưng còn nhiều hơn nữa. Vậy ý chị là gì?
There's so much more than war, right? And it's the more than war that I feel is important to look at. The war has a profound impact, but it's like when you think about, okay, who are Vietnamese people? Like, what do they love, right? What are they afraid of, right? It's very human. Like they love and they're afraid of a lot of the same things, but at the same time, it's filtered through their cultural history, right? They love cải lương, right? Yeah. Or they love, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I feel like there's so much more. And when you only talk about the war, then it's like you keep waging the war. You know what I mean? If you don't talk before the war, you don't talk about after the war, then it's always this frame.
Image.
Yeah, it stays, and and it's also a limitation for people who aren't Vietnamese. When they interact with the Vietnamese person, they only want to talk about the war. You know what I mean? Partly because that was their connection to it. But I feel like you cannot limit yourself to one lens.
Nhà văn Lê Thị Diễm Thúy đã từng đọc diễn nhiều nơi trong vở kịch Mùa hè đỏ lửa. Nhưng lý do gì mà cô đã chọn tựa đề cho vở kịch này? cô chia sẻ.
It's a series of bombings that the North did on the South in 72. And I made reference to it in my performance piece because I was born in 72. So my parents call that year mùa hè đỏ lửa, right? That whole year they call it that because of those series of bombings that occurred. If you go to Hoi An, right outside, you can see some of the Cham towers that were affected by this intense bombing and stuff. So it's a period that I think where the tension between the North and the South is very strong, you know, and only Southerners really refer to it in that way.
Và câu hỏi cuối cùng khán giả muốn biết là khi nào cuốn sách này có thể dịch sang tiếng Việt? Cô trả lời với một niềm hy vọng.
I hope soon. I hope within a year at the most. But you know, it's going through a Vietnamese publishing house. I'll believe it when I see it. You know, so I like it's in the works. There's actually been a delay, but I hope that we will be able to see it soon.
Lê Thị Diễm Thuy được xem là một nghệ sĩ cá tính khi cô kiên quyết không viết Hoa và luôn viết đầy đủ tên mình trong tiếng Mỹ. Cô viết Lê Thị Diễm Thuy vì không muốn tên mình là danh từ riêng và chẳng cần sự nổi bật. Thơ và truyện của cô từng xuất hiện trên Massachusetts Review, Harper's Magazine, Granta và tuyển tập The Very Inside. Hai vở kịch độc diễn của cô là Red Fury Summer, Mùa hè đỏ lửa và The Bodies Between Us, Những xác người giữa chúng ta, đã được trình diễn nhiều nơi trong nước Mỹ và châu Âu. Cuốn tiểu thuyết đầu tay của cô The Gangster We're All Looking For, Gã du đảng mà tất cả chúng ta đang lùng kiếm, được Alfred A. Knopf xuất bản năm 2001. Cô từng nhận được nhiều giải thưởng, trong đó có những học bổng của các sáng hội Radcliffe và Guggenheim. Mãi đau đấu với Việt Nam là những nỗi buồn và tâm sự mà nhà văn Lê Thị Diễm Thuy đã chuyển tải qua tiểu thuyết đầu tay của cô, The Gangster We're All Looking For, và được chọn là tác phẩm hay nhất trong năm 2011 qua chương trình One Book One San Diego. Cô đã không ngừng cảm ơn khán giả khắp nơi và ba mẹ của cô đã tạo cho cô cơ hội gia nhập vào xã hội Hoa Kỳ và trở thành một nhà văn người Mỹ gốc Việt thật điêu luyện và mến mộ trong lĩnh vực văn học.
It's been my pleasure. Chúc mừng năm mới.
Cảm ơn chị rất nhiều.
Yeah.
Xin cảm ơn sự theo dõi của quý vị và xin hẹn gặp lại quý vị trong một chương trình kỳ tới.